He made a mistake. I took back my fiancé after he cheated. I thought love could conquer betrayal if we just set clear boundaries. But what I learned is that you can't rebuild a future with someone who is secretly keeping a back door open to their past. This is a story about drawing a line in the sand. If you believe in second chances but not third ones, make sure you're subscribed. The list of rules felt like a scar on our relationship, a constant reminder of the trust he had shattered. I told him, "This is it. Leo, this is the last chance." For 10 months. It seemed to work. For 10 months. I breathed air that didn't feel heavy with lies. But then, I started noticing how he guarded his phone, the same way he did the first time. It's funny how betrayal has a physical memory. It's not just in your head, it's in your bones. I remember the first time I found out. Almost a year ago now. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was quiet. Sickening. I had picked up his phone to use the calculator, and a text message lit up the screen. A name I didn't know, Isabel, followed by a string of hearts. My own heart felt like it had dropped through the floor. The world narrowed to that glowing little screen. The conversation that followed was a blur of his stammered excuses and my hollow blank Ds. Quiet questions. I didn't scream. I remember wanting to, but the sound was trapped somewhere in my throat, choked by a sudden, crushing weight. He cried. He swore it was a mistake, that he was lost, that I was the only one he truly wanted. And a part of me, the part that had spent 6 years building a life with this man, desperately wanted to believe him. So, I did. But not without conditions. We sat at our small kitchen table, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and my unsteady breathing. I laid out the rules, the words tumbling out of me. Conditions for a peace I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. No contact with her. Ever. Blocked on all platforms. I get full access to his phone and social media. Anytime I ask. New questions asked. He had to be home by a certain time unless he cleared it with me first. It was harsh. It felt controlling and ugly. And it wasn't the kind of person I ever wanted to be. But it was the only way I could see a path forward. He agreed to everything. His eyes red and swollen. Nodding so eagerly it made my stomach turn. Anything. Clara. He'd said. Anything to fix this? And for a while, it did. The 10 months that followed were a fragile peace accord. We started planning the wedding again. Sending out, save the dates with a photo of us smiling on a beach. A photo taken before the fault line had split our world in two. I tried to let the walls down. Brick by painful brick. I stopped the compulsive urge to check his phone, telling myself that trust was a choice, and I had to choose it every day. We were getting back to normal. We were Clara and Leo again. Or so I told myself. Tonight, we were in the living room, curled up on opposite ends of the sofa. A documentary about deep-sea life playing softly on the television. It was one of those comfortable, quiet evenings that I had once cherished. I was telling him about a new project at work. A challenging logo design for a coffee startup. He was nodding, making the right noises. But his eyes were glued to his phone. Then it rang. It wasn't the loud, obnoxious ringtone he used for most calls. It was a subtle buzz. A vibration against the sofa cushion, but I felt it like an electric shock. I saw the way his body tensed. A barely perceptible flinch. He glanced at the screen, his thumb immediately swiping to silence it. He stood up, stretching theatrically. "Just gonna take this," he said, his voice a little too casual. "Important client. They're in a different time zone." He walked into the bedroom and closed the door behind him. Not all the way, but just enough so it clicked shut. I stared at the wood of that door. My mind suddenly a whirlwind of static. Important client. The words echoed in the quiet room. Since when did a financial advisor take calls from important clients at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night? The cold prickle of fear, the one I had worked so hard to suppress for 10 months, was back. It started at the base of my neck and spread down my spine. Over the next few days, the cracks in our fragile peace began to spiderweb. He started coming home later, smelling of a cologne he didn't own, blaming it on after-work drinks with colleagues he never mentioned by name. The worst part was the phone. It was like a third person in our relationship again. He carried it with him everywhere. Even into the bathroom. When he set it down, it was always screened down on the counter. A small, dark rectangle of secrets. The tension in our small apartment became thick, suffocating. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for an impact I knew was coming. Finally, one evening, I couldn't take it anymore. He was scrolling through his phone while I was making dinner. A small, unreadable smile on his face. I kept my voice even, my hands busy chopping vegetables. Hey, is everything okay? You seem a little distant lately. He looked up, his smile vanishing. His eyes were instantly wary. What do you mean I'm right here? I don't know, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. You've just been quiet, and on your phone a lot. It feels like you're keeping something from me. His reaction was immediate, and it was brutal. He put his phone down with a sharp clap against the granite countertop. I can't believe this, he said, his voice rising. I am working my butt off for us. Glada. For this wedding. For our future. And you're accusing me again. I thought we were past this. He stood up, pacing the small kitchen space. This isn't about me. This is about your trust issues. I have done everything you asked. Everything. When does it end? When do you finally decide to believe me? Tears welled in my eyes, hot and shameful. He was doing it again, twisting it, turning it around until I was the one in the wrong. The one who was breaking us with my paranoia. I felt myself shrinking, the old wave of guilt washing over me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was the problem. He saw my tears and his tone softened, the anger replaced by a practiced, gentle sigh. He came over and wrapped his arms around me. Hey, come on. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped. He pulled away and took out his phone, opening our banking app. It was a move he'd used before, his ultimate trump card of reassurance. He showed me the screen, the joint account, the one we'd named our dream wedding, glowed with a balance of just over $25. Ling, ling, ling. See, he whispered, kissing my forehead. This is what I'm focused on. You and me. Our future. I love you. His arms felt like a cage, his words like a script. I leaned into him, letting him hold me. But the hug felt hollow, performative. The money was real, but the feeling wasn't. Later that evening, he went out to pick up a bottle of wine, a peace offering. He left his iPad on the coffee table. I usually never touched his devices anymore. It was part of my effort to trust him. But I just wanted to put on a movie, to fill the silence with something other than my own thoughts. I picked it up and unlocked it. The screen lit up with the home menu, and then, at the top of the screen, a banner slid down. A notification from iMessage. My blood ran cold. The name was there. Isabel. and beneath it, a short, gut-wrenching message: miss you. Last night was amazing. The world stopped. The sound of the traffic outside. The hum of the refrigerator. My own heartbeat, it all faded away into a dull roar. The iPad felt impossibly heavy in my hands. It was happening again. Or maybe it had never stopped. My thumb trembled as I tapped the notification. It took me to their conversation, and my breath left my body in a single, painful gasp. It wasn't just last night. It was an entire history. Months of it. Scrolling up, I saw messages from last week. From last month. From 6 months ago. Right through the holidays. Through our anniversary. Through all the days I had convinced myself we were healing. There were inside jokes. Plans to meet up. Paragraphs of him complaining about me. About my rules and my paranoia. And there, nestled among the lies, were the words that broke what was left of my heart. She's just security. One of his texts read, "You're the one I want." The part of me that wanted to scream, to shatter the iPad against the wall, went quiet. The hot, frantic pulse of betrayal in my veins began to slow, replaced by something else. An icy calm. A terrifying, absolute clarity. The tears that had been threatening to fall simply dried up. I carefully closed the cover of the iPad and placed it back on the coffee table. Exactly where he had left it. I sat there on the sofa, in the quiet of our living room, and stared at the blank television screen. The part of me that wanted to save us had just died. And in its place, something cold and sharp and clear began to grow. The sound of the key in the lock was a gunshot in the silence. My head snapped up. I had been sitting there for what felt like an eternity, but the clock on the cable box told me it had only been 15 minutes. 15 minutes since my world had been hollowed out for the second and final time. I heard the door swing open, the familiar thud as it closed, and Leo's cheerful voice calling out, "Honey, I'm home, got the good stuff." I stayed on the sofa, my posture unchanged. My hands were resting in my lap, perfectly still. That icy calm hadn't left me. It had settled deep in my marrow. A strange and terrible strength. He walked into the living room, a brown paper bag in one hand, a wide smile on his face. The smile faltered when he saw my expression. "Hey," he said, his voice softening with concern. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I summoned a smile from some deep, forgotten reserve of energy. It felt like a mosque. Thin and brittle. Just tired. Long day. His shoulders relaxed. He believed it. Of course. It did. He came over, leaned down, and kissed my cheek. His lips were warm, but all I could feel was the memory of the words I'd read. "She's just security. You're the one I want." The kiss was a lie. His entire existence in this apartment, with me, was a lie. I didn't flinch. I was surprisingly good at this. "Well, this should help," he said, pulling a bottle of Cabernet from the bag. "I'll open it. You pick a movie." He went into the kitchen, and the sound of the corkscrew turning was unnaturally loud. My eyes darted to the iPad on the coffee table. The evidence. My mind, which had been a sea of static, was now working with a chilling efficiency. I picked it up, my movements fluid and quiet. I opened the messages again. My heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I scrolled. Took screenshots. Dozens of them. The loving texts. The secret plans. the casual insults he threw my way. I airdropped every single one to my phone and my laptop, watching the blue progress bar fill up. Then I deleted the screenshots from the iPad's photo library and closed the message app, leaving it exactly as I had found it. The entire operation took less than 60 seconds. He came back into the room with 2 glasses of wine. None the wiser. I spent the rest of the evening performing the role of a loving fiancé. I laughed at his jokes. I asked about his day, listening to the fabricated stories about clients and meetings. Every word, a small, sharp pinprick against my skin. We watched a mindless comedy, and I felt nothing. It was like watching my life from a great distance. A movie about a woman I used to be. That night, lying in bed next to him, sleep was an impossibility. I lay on my side, facing away from him, my body rigid. I listened to the sound of his breathing, the slow, steady rhythm of a man sleeping without a care in the world. How could he lie here, next to me, after spending his day whispering sweet nothings to another woman? The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. My grief from earlier had burned itself out, leaving behind the clean, hard ash of anger. Not a hot, screaming anger, but a cold, quiet rage. It was the kind of rage that didn't demand to be screamed. It demanded to be used. I spent the dark hours not crying, but planning. The next morning, I woke up before him. The calm was still there, a solid core inside me. I made coffee, my movements practiced and normal. He came out of the bedroom, yawning, and kissed my shoulder. "Morning," he mumbled. I just nodded, handing him a mug. While he was in the shower, I took my laptop into our small home office and closed the door. I needed more than just text messages. I needed a timeline. I needed facts that couldn't be twisted or denied. I logged into our shared Google account. It was something we'd set up years ago for calendars and photos. A digital monument to a partnership that was now a ruin. I navigated to his location history. And there it was. A map of his betrayal. It wasn't just one place. There were frequent stops, 2 or 3 times a week, at an apartment complex across town I'd never even heard of. They were usually during his lunch hour. Then there were the other stops, the ones that made my stomach clench. 2 separate visits in the last month to a cheap-looking hotel just off the interstate. Both on evenings he had claimed to be stuck at the office with a deadline. The data was cold, impartial, and damning. I took screenshots of everything. Then, I opened another tab and logged into our joint credit card account. I scanned the statement, my eyes flicking past the familiar charges for groceries and gas, and then I saw them. Restaurant charges I didn't recognize. A charge from a florist. And the final, sickening confirmation, 2 charges from the Sunrise Inn, matching the dates and locations from his Google history. He had paid for his infidelity with our shared money. The audacity of it stole my breath. I saved everything to a secure folder on my laptop. Password protected. I had enough. I had more than enough. The question was no longer if our relationship was over. The question was how I was going to end it. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a screaming match or a tearful breakdown. He didn't deserve my tears. It deserved consequences. I needed to talk to someone. Not my parents. Not yet. I needed someone who wouldn't just offer sympathy, but a strategy. I needed my brother. I called Ben from the office, my voice low. "Hey, can you meet me for lunch? It's important." There was no hesitation in his voice. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "No," I said simply. But it's going to be. We met at a small diner halfway between our offices. I had my laptop with me. As soon as we sat down in a booth in the back, I opened it and turned it to face him. I didn't say a word. I just showed him the messages, the location history, the credit card statements. I watched his face as he scrolled through the evidence. Ben had never fully trusted Leo after the first time, but he had respected my decision to try again. Now, his expression shifted from concern to a quiet, simmering fury. When he was done, he closed the laptop and looked at me, his eyes dark with anger on my behalf. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I'm so sorry. Clara." "Don't be," I said, and I was surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I'm just done." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm leaving him," I said. "But I'm not just walking out. I'm not giving him the chance to spin this, to make me out to be the crazy, paranoid fiancé who finally pushed him away. He doesn't get to control the narrative this time. I do." A slow smile spread across Ben's face. "Okay," he said, leaning forward. "So what's the plan?" For the next hour, we mapped it out. It wasn't a revenge plan. It was an exit strategy. A methodical, step-by-step reclamation of my life. First, the money. The wedding fund. It was half mine, and I wasn't leaving it behind for him to spend on Isabel. Second, my belongings. I needed to get my most important things out of the apartment without him knowing. Third, the announcement. A single, clear communication to both of our families, with undeniable proof, so there could be no debate about who was at fault. We left the diner with a purpose. That afternoon, sitting at my desk, I did the scariest and most liberating thing I have ever done. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to my bank's website. I opened a new checking account. In my name only. The process took 10 minutes. Then, I logged into our joint savings account. I looked at the number one last time, $25. Ling ling ling. Our dream wedding. Our future. I initiated a transfer for exactly half of it, $12. $500 to my new account. As I clicked confirm, I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I felt a surge of power. This wasn't just money. This was my security deposit on a new life. This was the foundation of my escape. The transfer would take a day to process. I had a small window of time. The final piece of the plan was putting together the message that would detonate this part of my life so I could start building a new one. I started drafting an email, addressed to my parents. His parents, my brother, and his sister. The subject line was simple: canceling the wedding. I attached the screenshots, the most damning messages. The hotel bills. I wrote a few short, factual sentences explaining that I had discovered Leo had been unfaithful again, and that the engagement was over. I scheduled the email to be sent the next evening. That night, as I packed a small overnight bag with my essentials, my laptop, important document, a change of clothes, my eyes landed on the small velvet box on my dresser. Inside was the engagement ring. A beautiful, brilliant cut diamond that had once symbolized a promise of forever. Now, it just felt like a prop in a long-running play. A symbol of all the broken promises. I picked it up. The metal cool against my skin. It felt foreign. Like it belonged to someone else. With a steady hand, I took the ring off my finger and placed it back in its box, closing the lid with a soft, final click. The final click of the velvet box echoed in the quiet bedroom. a sound that felt as definitive as a gavel striking wood. I placed it squarely in the center of the dresser, a small, dark monument to a future that was now officially dead. My overnight bag was waiting by the door. My laptop, containing the arsenal of truth, was on the nightstand. The email was scheduled. All the pieces were in place. All that was left was the final, messy, human element, Leo. I walked back into the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't turn on the television or pick up a book. I just waited. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to grow louder with each passing second, measuring out the final moments of my old life. I felt strangely disconnected, as if I were an actress waiting for her cue. There was no fear, no anxiety, just a profound and unsettling stillness. The storm had already passed through me, leaving this quiet, hard resolve in its wake. An hour later, I heard his keys jingle outside the door. My body didn't react. My heart rate didn't quicken. The lock turned, and the door swung open. Leo walked in, humming a tuneless melody, dropping his briefcase by the door with a familiar thud. He was smiling, relaxed. He had no idea he was walking into an amputation. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie as he walked toward the kitchen. Traffic was a nightmare. I was thinking maybe we could order some Thai food tonight, my treat. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Let it curdle his good mood. He stopped, his hand hovering over the refrigerator handle, and turned to look at me properly. He finally registered my posture, the stillness of the room. "Clara, everything okay?" he asked, his smile fading into a look of cautious confusion. "Sight down, Leo," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't sound like my own. "We need to talk." A flicker of something annoyance fear crossed his face. This was not part of his evening plan. "Talk about what? Can't it wait? I'm starving." "No," I said, my gaze unwavering. "It can't." He sighed, along, put upon sound, and walked over to the armchair opposite the sofa, sinking into it. "Okay. What is it now?" he asked. The implication, clear. "What paranoid fantasy have you cooked up this time?" I didn't rise to the bait. I reached over to the coffee table, picked up my laptop, and opened it. I turned the screen to face him. On it was the first piece of evidence, the map of his location history, dotted with the red pins of his secret visits to the apartment complex and the Sunrise Inn. He squinted at the screen. For a moment, there was just blank confusion. Then, I saw the blood drain from his face. He knew exactly what he was looking at. "What is this?" he stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "What am I looking at?" "You know what it is," I said quietly. "It's a map of all the places you've been when you told me you were at work." I clicked to the next tab. The credit card statement, with the hotel charges highlighted in yellow. Then the next tab, the screenshots of his iMessages with Isabel. I didn't narrate them. I let him read the words himself. "She's just security. You're the one I want." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the frantic sound of his own breathing. He stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The first stage of his defense kicked in: denial. "This is insane," he whispered, shaking his head. This is fake. You made this up." "I didn't have to," I replied, my voice still level. He slammed his hand down on the arm of the chair, his face contorting with a sudden, desperate anger. The gaslighting began. You were spying on me. You went through my things after everything I've done to earn back your trust. You go behind my back and do this. This is why we have problems. Clara, your paranoia is destroying us. A year ago, those words would have shattered me. They would have sent me spiraling into a vortex of guilt and self-doubt. Now, they were just noise. They slid right off the armor of the truth I was wearing. I looked at him. Truly looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I loved. I saw a cornered animal, lashing out with the only weapons he had: manipulation and blame. It's not paranoia when you're right, I said. That simple statement seemed to deflate him. The anger collapsed, replaced by a raw, bleeding panic. His face crumpled. Okay, he said, his voice cracking. Okay. I screwed up. I screwed up. I know. It was stupid. It didn't mean anything. I swear. It's over. I'll end it right now. We can fix this. Please. Clara. Don't throw all of this away over a stupid mistake. Tears were streaming down his face now. It was a convincing performance. It was the same performance he had given me 10 months ago. But the audience had changed. It's not a mistake, Leo, I said, closing the laptop. It's a pattern, and I'm done being a part of it. I stood up. He watched me, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that his tears weren't working this time. What are you doing? He asked. I'm making sure everyone knows the truth, I said. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the send button on the scheduled email. His eyes followed my movement, and a dawning horror spread across his face as he realized what was happening. He was losing control of the narrative. Clara. No, he said, his voice a choked whisper. Don't. Please. Don't do this. I looked him straight in the eye and pressed send. The little whoosh sound of the email leaving my phone was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on my past. I put the phone back in my pocket. For a long second, there was nothing. Then, his phone, sitting on the end table beside him, buzzed. A text from his mother. Then it buzzed again. His sister. Mine buzzed in my pocket. A text from my dad. Call me. Now. The digital fallout was beginning. Leo stared at his phone, then back at me, his face a mess of tears and raw panic. He had been completely outmaneuvered. There was no story he could spin. No lie he could tell that would fix this. The proof was already in their inboxes. How could you? He sobbed. You've ruined me. No. Leo, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. You ruined yourself. I'm just turning on the lights. I walked calmly into the bedroom and picked up my pre-packed bag. When I came back out, he was standing in the middle of the room, looking lost. I walked over to the small table by the door where we kept our keys. I took the small velvet box out of my pocket and placed it on the table, right next to his car keys. He stared at the box, and a fresh wave of despair washed over him. Clara, please, he begged, stepping in front of me, blocking the door. Don't leave. We can talk about this. We can go to therapy. I'll do anything. I looked at his tear-streaked face, at the man I had given a second chance to, a man who had taken that chance and used it to lie to me more skillfully. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. There's nothing left to talk about, I said. I stepped around him. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. Please, he said, his voice raw. I met his gaze. And for the first time, he must have seen the absolute finality in my eyes. I didn't struggle. I just looked at him. His grip loosened, and his hand fell away. I opened the front door and walked out, not looking back. I pulled it shut behind me, and the sound of the lock clicking into place was the sweetest sound of freedom. I walked down the hallway, down the stairs, and out into the cool evening air. I didn't run. I walked with a steady, deliberate pace. When I got into my car and started the engine, the shaking started. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. A delayed reaction to the years of tension finally leaving my body. I took a breath. A deep, shuddering gasp. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, it filled my lungs completely. I pulled out of the parking spot and drove away from the building, from the life I had so carefully tried to rebuild. And I didn't check the rearview mirror once. I drove towards Ben's apartment, towards the first night of whatever came next. The streetlights blurred through the tears that were finally falling. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. The drive to Ben's apartment was a blur of streetlights and tears. Each red light was a chance to breathe. Each green light a push forward into the unknown. The shaking in my hands didn't subside until I pulled into a visitor parking spot in his complex. I cut the engine, and the sudden silence was overwhelming. For a moment, I just sat there, my forehead resting against the cool plastic of the steering wheel, letting the finality of it all wash over me. I had done it. I had walked out. The word free echoed in the quiet car. A concept so vast I couldn't yet grasp its meaning. Ben must have been watching from his window, because he was jogging down the stairs before I had even unbuckled my seatbelt. He opened my car door, his face a mixture of concern and fierce pride. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached in, helped me out of the car, and pulled me into a hug. I collapsed against him, all the strength that had carried me through the last 24 hours finally dissolving. I wasn't the cold, calculating strategist anymore. I was just Clara, a woman whose heart had been broken twice by the same man. And I sobbed into my brother's shoulder. He led me up to his apartment. A small, bachelor pad kind of place that smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. It was the safest place in the world. He sat me down on his worn-out leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and put a steaming mug of tea in my hands. You did it, he said softly, sitting on the coffee table in front of me. You were so strong. I shook my head. The warm ceramic of the mug a small comfort against my cold hands. I don't feel strong. Clara, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Strength isn't about not breaking. It's about putting yourself back together. You just walked out of a burning building. It's okay to cough up a little smoke. My phone, which I had put on the cushion beside me, began to vibrate. It buzzed and lit up relentlessly. Texts from my parents, missed calls from his sister, and a string of increasingly desperate messages from Leo. I watched it jump and buzz, a frantic little rectangle of chaos, and felt nothing but a profound sense of distance. That was a different life. A different Clara. Ben saw me looking at it, reached over, and switched it to silent. The first night was sleepless. But it wasn't the anxious, heart-pounding sleeplessness I had endured next to Leo. It was a quiet, contemplative wakefulness. I lay on the pull-out sofa in Ben's living room, staring at the unfamiliar patterns the city lights made on the ceiling. And I thought about the red flags I had ignored, the little compromises I had made, the hope I had clung to long after it had died. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned away, leaving a clean, quiet space for grief to finally settle in. I was grieving not for the man Leo was, but for the man I had once believed he could be. I was grieving for the future I had so carefully designed, a future that had turned out to be built on a foundation of sand. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon. Ben was in the kitchen. A quiet, solid presence. He had already called our parents and given them the short version, protecting me from having to relive it all immediately. While we were eating, a call came through on my phone from a number I recognized with a jolt: Leo's mom. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't have the energy for accusations or pleas on his behalf. "You don't have to answer that," Ben said. Seeing the look on my face, but something made me pick it up. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. "Hello." Her voice on the other end was thick with tears. "Claro. Honey, I am so sorry." The words were so unexpected. They knocked the air out of my lungs. It's okay," I managed to say, not knowing what else to say. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "No. It's not okay. What he did to you, again, there are no words. I saw the email. I wanted you to hear it from me. This is not how we raised him. You are a wonderful, beautiful girl. And you gave him a second chance that he never deserved. I just want you to know that we don't blame you for a second. We are on your side. Entirely." I started to cry again. But these were different tears. They were tears of validation. Of being seen, to hear his own mother affirm my decision, to release me from any misplaced guilt, was a gift I hadn't known I needed. We spoke for a few more minutes. A quiet, sad conversation between two women who had both been let down by the same man. When I hung up, I felt lighter. One of the final threads tying me to that family, the thread of obligation and shared history, had been cut with kindness. Over the next few days, Ben became my gatekeeper. He fielded the calls and relayed the necessary information. The fallout from my single email was swift and total. Leo, according to Ben, had tried to spin a story about me being unstable and hacking his accounts. But the evidence was too clear, too specific. No one believed him. His friends were distant. His own family was furious with him. He was completely, utterly alone. Stranded on an island of his own making. Ben told me, a week later, that Leo had shown up at Isabel's apartment, apparently thinking she was his consolation prize. She had, in no uncertain terms, laughed in his face. She had been in it for the thrill, the fun of a secret affair. She had no interest in the messy, tear-streaked reality of a man who had just lost everything. He had lost his fiancé, the respect of his family, and the fantasy of his mistress. All in the space of a few days. He had nothing. Hearing this didn't bring me a surge of vengeful joy. It was more like the quiet satisfaction of watching a math equation solve itself. It was the logical conclusion, the natural consequence. He hadn't just lost me. He had lost the security he so callously took for granted, and was left with nothing to show for it. The most important phone call I made that week was to a realtor, armed with the $12 500 that was now safely in my own bank account. I started looking for an apartment. I didn't want to stay with Ben for long. I needed my own space to heal. A place that had no memories of Leo attached to it. I found it a week later. A small, one-bedroom place on the third floor of an old brick building, with huge windows that flooded the living room with afternoon light. It was smaller than the apartment I had shared with Leo, but it felt 100 times bigger. It felt like mine. Signing the lease was a ceremony. My hand didn't shake as I signed my name. Just my name. On the dotted line. I paid the security deposit and first month's rent with the money from the wedding fund. The irony was not lost on me. The money we had saved for our future together was now funding my future without him. It was the ultimate Chekhov's gun. Firing a bullet of independence. Moving in was a cleansing ritual. Ben and my dad helped with the heavy lifting. But I did most of the unpacking myself. I bought new sheets. New towels. A coffee maker that was just for me. Each box I unpacked. Each picture I hung on the wall. Felt like an act of reclaiming my own life. One evening, after a long day of setting up my new kitchen, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating takeout pizza from the box. And I laughed. It was the first real, deep, joyful laugh I had experienced in months. The acoustics in the empty room made it echo, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. About a month after I moved in, I was scrolling through the photos on my phone, looking for a picture of my niece. And then I saw one of him. A picture of us. Smiling on that vacation. The one we used for the save the dates. Me finger hovered over it. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the two happy people in that photo. They hadn't known what was coming. I scrolled through the others. Hundreds of them. Years of memories. Holidays. Birthdays. Quiet moments. I took a deep breath. I knew what I had to do. I went to my photo albums, selected every picture that had him in it, and I pressed delete. I watched the progress bar. A slow, steady erasure of a life that was no longer mine. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of hygiene. It was clearing out the clutter to make space for something new. Then I went to my contacts, found his name, and deleted that. 2. I didn't need to block him. He was already gone. I realized then the profound lesson I had learned. My mistake wasn't giving him a second chance. My mistake was believing that my love could fix his broken character. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about accepting that something is broken and choosing to let it go. So you don't cut yourself on the shattered pieces anymore. Self-respect means knowing when to walk away, when to choose the quiet. Uncertain peace of being alone over the loud. Chaotic pain of being with the wrong person. 6 months later, I used the rest of the wedding fund to book a trip. A solo trip to the coast. I spent a week in a small cottage by the sea. A place where the only schedule I had to follow was the tide. I spent my days walking on the beach, reading books, and learning how to enjoy my own company again. On my last evening there, I sat on the small wooden porch, a glass of wine in my hand, and watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and salty. The only sound was the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore. I felt a sense of peace so deep and profound it felt like it was coming from the center of the earth. I was whole. Not in spite of what had happened, but because of it. I had walked through fire and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but stronger. And with a clearer understanding of who I was and what I deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Having fun. I smiled. A real, Genuine smile that reached my eyes. I typed back a simple reply. More than you know. I put the phone down, took a sip of wine, and looked back out at the vast, endless ocean. I didn't know what my future held. There was no map, no 5-year plan, no wedding to prepare for. There was just the horizon, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything.